Imagine for a moment that there is a hidden force guiding many of your thoughts, your desires, and even the choices you make. A force so deeply embedded in your psyche that you don't even realize it's there. Now, think about how much of your behavior is not influenced by logic or conscious decision, but by something primal, something ancient, deeply buried in the recesses of your mind. What if I told you that this force is tied to sexuality, but not in the act itself, in the psychological energy it represents? Today, we will uncover a truth that many resist, but none can escape. The undeniable power of sexuality over the human psyche, and what the legendary Carl Jung discovered about what you're suppressing. Stay with me, because the final insight revealed in part 4 is the most transformative. It explains not only why this force controls you, but also how you can reclaim that power to change your life. Sex, a word that triggers a cascade of reactions: desire, shame, confusion, power. But why? Why does it hold such weight in the human mind? The answer begins with a question: is sex merely a physical need, or is it the gateway to something far deeper? Carl Jung believed it was far more than biological. He saw sexuality as a symbolic expression of psychic energy, what he called the libido. Not just sexual desire, but the raw life force that fuels all creativity, emotion, and action. This was revolutionary because it shattered the narrower view of his predecessor, Freud, who focused primarily on sexual repression as the root of neuroses. Jung went further, proposing that sexual energy, when misunderstood or repressed, becomes a shadow force that distorts our behavior, relationships, and self-understanding. Consider how society treats sexuality: censored, commodified, exploited, and repressed. What happens when something so fundamental to our being is not consciously integrated into who we are? It doesn't vanish, it hides. And from that hidden place, it begins to manipulate us. Jung referred to this hidden force as the shadow, the part of ourselves we reject, suppress, or ignore. Within the shadow lies our unknown sexuality, the fantasies, desires, and vulnerabilities that we have learned to shame or deny. These parts of our sexual identity continue to live within us, but now they control us from the dark recesses of the unconscious. Ask yourself, how much of your behavior, your insecurities, your emotional reactions, and even your judgments of others are influenced by desires and fears you haven't fully explored? How much of your inner conflict stems from your attempt to separate yourself from your instincts? Jung believed that the repression of sexuality doesn't purify the soul, it fragments it, and this fragmentation leads to a deep psychological disconnection, a gap between our conscious persona and the unconscious forces driving us. Sex, a topic so charged with complexity, it stirs deep emotional responses from people across all cultures and societies. But what if I told you that sex is not merely a physical act? It is, according to Carl Jung, something far deeper. He believed that sexuality represents a profound, symbolic expression of the libido, which is not just sexual desire, but the raw, vital life force that drives creativity, emotion, and every action we take. This is where Jung's ideas begin to diverge sharply from his predecessor, Sigmund Freud. Freud, who emphasized sexual repression as the root cause of neuroses, focused on how denying this energy leads to psychological disorders. Jung, however, went beyond this simplistic framework. He argued that the libido is not just about satisfying physical urgencies, about tapping into a deeper source of power and vitality. For Jung, sexuality is tied to something more fundamental: life energy itself. This force doesn't only manifest as sexual desire, but also fuels our creativity, our interactions, and our emotional depth. It's the very same energy that drives us to create, to love, to explore, and even to change the world around us. But when this energy is misunderstood or suppressed, it doesn't just fade, it becomes distorted. Think of it this way: when we repress a natural part of ourselves, like our sexual energy, it doesn't vanish into thin air. Instead, it hides, and from this hidden space, it manipulates us. It creeps into our behavior, our relationships, and even our deepest desires. This is what Jung called the shadow, the repressed aspects of our psyche, the parts of us that we reject, deny, or simply fail to acknowledge. And it is in this shadow that our true sexual identity, the unacknowledged parts of ourselves, lies dormant. Jung's exploration of the libido went far beyond the physical realm. It became a vehicle for self-expression, creativity, and even spiritual growth. The idea that sexual energy is more than just about reproduction, more than just about pleasure, opens up a whole new world. Jung suggested that sexual energy is essentially a form of psychic energy that drives us to seek wholeness, to become more than just the sum of our fragmented parts. But what happens when this energy is denied? What happens when we push it into the dark corners of our subconscious and try to ignore it? The answer, according to Jung, is that this energy doesn't disappear, it turns inward and wreaks havoc. It distorts our perception, causes internal conflicts, and leads to neuroses that affect not just our relationships, but the way we understand ourselves. The key to understanding this is the realization that what you suppress controls you. And until you begin to consciously embrace this energy, rather than bury it, you will remain disconnected from a vital part of your true self. Jung's exploration of the shadow is perhaps one of his most profound contributions to psychological thought. He described the shadow as the part of ourselves that we reject, deny, or fail to acknowledge. It consists of traits, desires, and impulses that we deem unacceptably affirm, things that society has taught us to hide. And within this shadow lies our sexual energy, unacknowledged, misunderstood, and repressed. What happens when a vital part of our nature, like sexuality, is hidden away? Jung believed that this repressed energy doesn't simply disappear. Instead, it becomes a force lurking in the background, influencing us in ways we don't fully understand. It's not uncommon to feel uneasy about desires that seem taboo or forbidden, and this discomfort often stems from what we have buried deep within ourselves. Consider this: have you ever experienced a sudden outburst of emotion, an unexpected anger, a moment of jealousy, or an intense desire that feels unexplainable? These are signs that the unconscious is trying to communicate with us, drawing attention to parts of ourselves that we've ignored or suppressed. When we repress certain aspects of our sexuality, whether it be desires, fantasies, or even simple emotional needs, we set up a psychological conflict. This creates a divide between our conscious self, the persona we present to the world, and the unconscious forces that simmer below the surface. In Jungian terms, this is a form of psychological fragmentation, a split between who we are and what we've denied in ourselves. But why does this happen? Why does our sexuality, something so deeply connected to our very essence, become a hidden force that controls us from the shadows? The answer lies in the way society has conditioned us to view sexuality as something shameful, dangerous, or simply a means to an end. From early childhood, we are taught to repress desires that don't align with social norms, especially when it comes to sexual expression. This leaves us with a fractured sense of self, one that is divided between what we present to the world and what we secretly long for. Jung observed that sexual repression doesn't purify the solid fragments. By denying a fundamental part of ourselves, we lose access to a critical source of life energy, which leads to a disconnection from our own emotional and creative potential. We become cut off from the very energy that could fuel our personal growth and understanding. This disconnection doesn't just affect us on a personal level, it ripples out into our relationships. Jung argued that our sexual repression manifests in the way we interact with others. We project our repressed desires onto those around us, particularly in romantic and sexual relationships. We are drawn to people who mirror our unconscious material, and this projection is often the root cause of both passion and conflict in our relationships. So, ask yourself, how much of your emotional turmoil or your judgments of others are tied to aspects of yourself that you've not fully explored? How much of your inner conflict stems from the parts of you that you've been taught to suppress or deny? The key to resolving this internal struggle lies in integration. Jung believed that healing begins when we stop rejecting the parts of ourselves that we've disowned. Only by confronting and integrating the shadow, the hidden aspects of our psyche, can we achieve true wholeness. Sexuality is one of the most powerful forces within the human psyche, and yet, society has historically treated it as a taboo, a subject to be repressed, commodified, and exploited. From ancient cultures to modern times, sex has been simultaneously worshipped and feared, celebrated and hidden. But what happens when something so central to our human experience is not consciously integrated into who we are? Jung argued that repression is not the solution. When we suppress our sexual desires or impulses, they do not vanish. They simply retreat into the unconscious, where they begin to influence us in ways we don't fully understand. And it's not just individual repression we need to consider, it's the broader societal attitude toward sexuality that plays a crucial role. Think about the way society handles sex, whether through the media, advertising, or the legal system. It is commodified, sold, and used to manipulate our emotions, desires, and behaviors. Sex is everywhere, on screens, in advertisements, in casual conversations. But honest, open discussions about its deeper meaning, its emotional significance, or its connection to the psyche are rare. This paradox between sexual overexposure and the lack of meaningful conversation creates a strange, disjointed relationship with our own sexual energy. We live in a world where sex is highly commercialized, yet true understanding of sexuality, intimacy, and emotional connection remains elusive for many. Jung believed that the repression of sexuality leads to what he called the fragmentation of the self. When society represses sexual expression, we become disconnected from a part of our humanity that is deeply tied to our creativity, vitality, and inner power. By distancing ourselves from this natural energy, we stifle the very forces that could lead to personal growth, deep connection, and self-empowerment. Take a moment to reflect on the world we live in today. How often is sex portrayed as something purely physical, something to be bought and sold, or something to be kept hidden behind closed doors? How often do we see sexuality as a source of power, creativity, or emotional depth? Rarely. But Jung's insight was clear. The shadow of repressed sexuality is not simply an individual issue, it is a collective one. Society at large plays a role in repressing this energy, creating norms and rules that dictate what is acceptable and what is not. In doing so, it encourages individuals to disconnect from their own desires, pushing them into the shadows, where they grow stronger and more difficult to control. The consequence of this disconnection is that the more we repress sexual energy, the more it will influence our behavior in unconscious ways. The more we push it away, the more power it gains over us. This energy doesn't disappear, it takes on new forms, often manifesting in destructive behaviors, compulsions, and inner conflict. However, Jung also offered a solution. The path to healing is not through further repression, but through integration. By acknowledging and integrating this repressed energy into our conscious awareness, we can reclaim the power it holds and transform it into a force for good. Instead of being controlled by our unconscious desires and fears, we can harness the energy of the libido for creativity, vitality, and self-expression. When we push away certain aspects of ourselves, particularly our sexual energy, we don't just repress a desire, we fragment our psyche. This fragmentation, Jung argued, has a profound impact on our mental and emotional well-being. The repression of sexual energy doesn't purify the soul, as many might believe. Instead, it creates a splitted disconnection between the conscious and unconscious mind, between the persona we present to the world and the hidden, repressed parts of ourselves. Jung observed that this inner disconnection leads to psychological turmoil. When we ignore or suppress a vital aspect of our identity, like our sexuality, we begin to lose touch with the forces that drive us, our creativity, our vitality, and even our sense of self-worth. The result is a deep internal conflict that manifests in various ways, including anxiety, self-doubt, and even depression. But this inner fragmentation doesn't stop there. It doesn't just affect our internal world, it bleeds into our relationships too. When we are disconnected from our own sexual energy, it influences the way we relate to others. We project our unconscious material onto the people around us, particularly in romantic and sexual relationships. Jung argued that when we haven't integrated our sexual energy, we tend to see others as symbols of the parts of ourselves that we have rejected. We are drawn to them, not because of who they truly are, but because they activate something unconscious within us. Think about your past relationships. How often have you found yourself attracted to someone who excites you, frustrates you, or even hurts you, and yet you couldn't seem to walk away? This isn't just coincidence. This is projection, the process by which we project our own unacknowledged desires, fears, and insecurities onto others. And the stronger our repressed sexual energy, the more intense the projection becomes. Jung believed that the key to overcoming this fragmentation and projection is integration, a process he called individuation. This involves bringing together the disparate parts of ourselves, the conscious and unconscious, the repressed and accepted, so that we can become whole. When we suppress our sexuality, we disconnect from our creative potential, from the very energy that could allow us to live fully, authentically, and with power. Take a moment to think about your own life. How much of your emotional pain, your insecurities, or your conflicts in relationships are tied to a disconnection from your sexual energy? What part of you have you rejected, and what impact does this rejection have on your overall well-being? Jung's work emphasizes that true healing is not about repressing or denying parts of ourselves. It's about accepting all aspects of our being, including our sexual energy, and integrating them into our conscious awareness. When we accept and embrace our repressed desires, they no longer control us from the shadows. Instead, they become a source of power that we can use to heal, grow, and transform. This process of integration is the key to reclaiming the vitality and creativity that sexual energy can offer. By confronting the aspects of ourselves we have denied, we open the door to deeper emotional connection, greater creative expression, and a more fulfilling life. The persona is a concept Jung introduced to describe the social mask we wear, the version of ourselves that we present to the world. It's the face we show others, the identity we curate to fit societal expectations. In many ways, our persona is essential for navigating social interactions, for maintaining harmony, and for being accepted in our communities. However, the persona can also be limiting, especially when it comes to expressing our true, authentic selves. Sexual energy, when repressed, becomes one of the most hidden aspects of our persona. It remains trapped in the unconscious, and we may go to great lengths to suppress or disguise it. In a society that often values restraint, modesty, and control, there is little room for open exploration of sexuality. This leads to a disconnect between who we present ourselves to be, the mask, and who we truly are on a deeper level. Jung believed that the persona plays an important role in allowing us to function in the world, but it should not be confused with the true self. The danger arises when the persona becomes too rigid, when we begin to identify with it too strongly. We may become so attached to our social mask that we forget about the parts of ourselves we hide beneath it, including our sexual nature. This is particularly true when it comes to sexual shame. Many people have been conditioned to feel embarrassed or uncomfortable about their sexual desires, fantasies, or identities. These repressed sexual aspects, then, stay hidden behind the persona, contributing to a sense of fragmentation in the self. We show the world one version of ourselves, while the true, repressed sexual self remains in the shadow. When we live behind this mask, we don't allow ourselves to fully experience life or intimacy. We may enter relationships, but they remain shallow, rooted in the projection of our ideal selves, rather than a true connection with another person. The persona becomes a performance, a role we play to gain approval, to avoid judgment, or to meet external expectations. But here's the key: the more we identify with the persona and suppress our sexual truth, the more we become disconnected from our true desires, our creativity, and our inner power. We perform a version of ourselves for the world, but we do not allow our authentic selves to shine through. Jung's individuation process encourages us to peel back the layers of the persona and confront the shadow, the repressed, hidden parts of ourselves, including our sexuality. True growth comes not from living in a carefully constructed persona, but from integrating the conscious and unconscious aspects of who we are. In terms of sexuality, this means allowing ourselves to embrace all parts of our sexual identity, our fantasies, desires, vulnerabilities, and the unacknowledged aspects that we've been taught to repress or deny. When we do this, the persona loses its grip over us, and we are free to live more authentically. True intimacy, whether emotional, physical, or psychological, requires vulnerability. But vulnerability is impossible when we are controlled by shame, guilt, and fear about our sexual energy. By confronting and integrating our sexual truth, we break free from the persona that hides who we truly are and create space for deeper, more authentic connections with others. One of the most intriguing aspects of Jung's work is the concept of projection, particularly in the realm of relationships. Projection is the psychological process by which we attribute our own unrecognized traits, desires, or fears to other people. It is the unconscious way our minds try to deal with the parts of ourselves that we have repressed, especially those connected to our sexuality. In romantic and sexual relationships, projection is particularly powerful. We are often drawn to people who seem to embody qualities or desires that we've suppressed within ourselves. These people may represent the very parts of us that we have rejected or failed to integrate. But here's the catch: we don't recognize this. Instead, we see them as fulfilling some unmet need or desire, believing they possess qualities that we want but don't acknowledge in ourselves. Think about your past relationships. Have you ever found yourself inexplicably drawn to someone, Someone who, at first, seemed to complete you perhaps. They embodied qualities you wished you had, or they stirred emotions you couldn't fully explain. But, as time went on, you realized that your intense attraction was not based on who they truly were, but rather what they symbolized to you, something that was hidden within your unconscious mind. This is projection at work. It's not that the other person is truly responsible for the way we feel about them, it's that we are projecting our unintegrated sexual energy onto them. We might be projecting repressed desires, unconscious fantasies, or even emotional wounds that we haven't dealt with. And this projection can create both powerful connections and intense conflicts. When we project our repressed desires onto others, we are essentially giving them power over us, because we are relying on them to reflect something we haven't yet fully embraced in ourselves. Jung believed that this process of projection is not limited to romantic relationships, it affects all human interactions. We tend to project our hidden traits onto others, seeing them in ways that reflect our unconscious mind. But in the context of romantic and sexual relationships, the consequences can be especially intense, as we often invest so much of our emotional energy into the person we are projecting onto. But the real work of personal growth comes when we stop projecting onto others and start integrating these repressed aspects of ourselves. This requires self-awareness, the willingness to confront the parts of our psyche we've denied or ignored. Jung taught that the process of individuation, or becoming whole, requires us to take responsibility for our projections and reclaim the power we've unconsciously given to others. Think about the times when you felt intense emotional reactions to someone else. Whether it was love, jealousy, anger, or infatuation, ask yourself, what is this really about? What part of myself am I projecting onto this person? What aspect of my own sexuality, my own desires, or my own emotional needs am I refusing to acknowledge? Jung's work shows that true intimacy is only possible when we stop projecting our unconscious desires onto others and start seeing them for who they truly are. And, more importantly, when we stop projecting our own shadow onto the world, we free ourselves from the power of those unconscious forces. We no longer need others to reflect our hidden desires. Instead, we can begin to integrate those desires into our own consciousness, and in doing so, empower ourselves to live authentically. When we take back the projection and bring those hidden parts of ourselves into the light, we create the opportunity for genuine connection, one that is based on mutual understanding, vulnerability, and authenticity. This is the path to real emotional intimacy, where we can love others, not from a place of need, but from a place of wholeness. Jung's view of sexual energy transcended its traditional biological and physical aspects. For him, the libido, often equated with sexual desire, was not merely about procreation or pleasure. It was a raw, vital force that fuels creativity, emotional depth, and the essence of life itself. This energy, when properly understood and channeled, can serve as a powerful catalyst for personal growth and self-expression. In many ways, sexual energy is the foundation of vitality. It is the spark behind our desire to create, to innovate, and to engage with the world in meaningful ways. Jung saw sexuality as an integral part of the psyche, connected to our deepest creative impulses. He argued that when this energy is repressed or misdirected, it stifles our creativity and keeps us from fully engaging with life. We may feel drained, uninspired, or disconnected from the things that once brought us joy. When we disconnect from our sexual energy, we essentially cut off a significant source of personal power. Think about it. How many of the things that give us life, art, music, writing, and even meaningful relationships, are born out of deep emotional and creative energy? This energy, in its purest form, is life force. It flows through us and fuels our passions, aspirations, and the ability to connect with others. When we repress this force, it doesn't just disappear, it becomes twisted and distorted. It manifests as anxiety, frustration, or creative blocks. In some cases, it even leads to unhealthy behaviors like obsession or addiction. However, when we accept and embrace our sexual energy, it transforms into something incredibly powerful. Creativity flourishes. We feel alive, connected to the world, and capable of creating and building. This doesn't just apply to artists or writers. It applies to everyone. Whether you're an entrepreneur, a scientist, a teacher, or a homemaker, the ability to tap into your sexual energy allows you to engage with the world in a dynamic and creative way. Jung recognized the powerful connection between sexuality and creativity. In fact, He often linked sexual energy to the process of individuation, the journey toward becoming a whole, integrated person. When we embrace our sexual energy, we unlock a wellspring of creative potential. This creative energy isn't limited to artistic endeavors. It extends to all aspects of life, from problem-solving and innovation to the way we engage in relationships. Take a moment to think about your own life. When was the last time you felt truly alive, when you were so engaged with what you were doing that time seemed to slip away? Was there a creative project, a hobby, or an experience that sparked this feeling of vitality? More often than not, those moments of intense engagement are when we are in touch with our creative energy, which is, at its core, connected to our sexual vitality. Jung believed that the libido, this life force energy, should not be denied or repressed. Instead, it should be expressed, and when it is, it becomes a source of immense creative and emotional power. The key is in recognizing this energy for what it is, not just sexual desire, but the underlying creative impulse that drives every aspect of our lives. When we repress this energy, we lose access to a deep well of personal vitality. But when we honor it, integrate it, and channel it creatively, it has the power to transform our lives, our work, and our relationships. Sexual energy, in its highest form, is not just a source of personal pleasure, it's the life force that drives us toward becoming fully alive, fully engaged, and fully ourselves. The repression of sexuality doesn't just cause internal fragmentation, it also has far-reaching effects on our mental health. Jung's theories highlighted the deep psychological consequences of denying our sexual energy. When we push away or suppress this powerful force, it doesn't disappear. It becomes repressed into the unconscious, where it can manifest in a variety of harmful ways. Psychological repression of sexual energy is not just an abstract concept, it has tangible effects on the mind and body. The longer we suppress our natural impulses, the more the repressed energy festers beneath the surface, contributing to feelings of anxiety, frustration, and disconnection. For many people, this repression creates an inner conflict, a battle between the conscious self, the persona, and the unconscious desires that remain hidden. This conflict can lead to feelings of alienation, where we feel disconnected from our true selves, unable to fully engage with life or connect with others. Jung saw the repression of sexuality as a key cause of neuroses and emotional suffering. When we hide a part of ourselves, we create a rift between who we truly are and how we present ourselves to the world. This rift doesn't just cause emotional pain, leads to psychological fragmentation, where the mind becomes divided and disjointed. It is no surprise, then, that the repression of sexual energy often manifests as self-doubt, anxiety, and depression, all symptoms of the unconscious mind's attempt to communicate its repressed needs. In modern psychology, the connection between repressed sexual energy and mental health issues has been recognized by many practitioners. Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, in his groundbreaking work, The Body Keeps the Score, explains how trauma, especially sexual trauma or repression, becomes embedded in the body's nervous system. The unresolved emotional pain caused by sexual repression doesn't just live in the mind, it is stored in the body, affecting our behavior, emotional regulation, and self-perception. The body doesn't forget what the mind tries to suppress, and the effects of sexual repression can linger in the nervous system for years, often leading to chronic stress, tension, and emotional instability. Furthermore, Jung observed that the repression of sexual energy can lead to destructive behavior patterns. When sexual energy is denied or misunderstood, it doesn't simply vanish, it transforms into other psychological symptoms, such as obsession, addiction, compulsive behaviors, or even violent outbursts. People who are cut off from their sexual energy may experience emotional outbursts that seem irrational or out of proportion to the situation. Jung believed that this was the unconscious mind's way of trying to communicate the need for balance and integration. The repression of sexuality is not just an individual problem, it's a cultural issue. Society's stance on sexual expression, whether rooted in religious dogma, moral codes, or cultural norms, often stigmatizes certain sexual behaviors and desires. When individuals internalize these societal judgments, they begin to repress their own desires and sexual identities. This repression is then passed down through generations, creating a cycle of shame and disconnection that affects both individuals and society as a whole. In modern times, we see this contradiction playing out. On one hand, sexuality is overexposed in media and advertising. On the other, honest, vulnerable conversations about sexuality are still rare. This creates a strange tension or disconnection between the public portrayal of sex and its real, emotional, and psychological significance. We are constantly bombarded with sexual images, yet true understanding of sexuality and emotional intimacy remains elusive. The way forward, Jung argued, is not to further repress our sexuality, but to embrace it, to bring it into conscious awareness and integration. By doing so, we free ourselves from the destructive patterns that result from sexual repression. We reclaim our energy, our power, and our vitality. Only when we integrate our sexual energy, accepting it as a natural and essential part of who we are, can we begin to heal and thrive. One of the most profound ways that the unconscious communicates with us is through dreams. Jung believed that dreams are the royal road to understanding the unconscious mind, and he often used dream analysis to uncover the hidden parts of the psyche. Dreams are not just random images or stories, they are symbolic expressions of our deepest desires, fears, and unresolved conflicts. And, when it comes to sexuality, dreams play a crucial role in revealing the parts of ourselves that we repress, deny, or fail to acknowledge. Sex in dreams rarely means just sex. Jung argued that sexual imagery in dreams often symbolizes something much deeper. In his view, sexuality in dreams is not only about physical desire, it represents the union of opposites, the merging of conflicting parts of the self. This is a crucial concept in Jungian psychology, the coniencio, or the alchemical marriage, the joining of masculine and feminine energies within the psyche. The sexual symbolism in dreams, therefore, reflects the desire for integration, the union of fragmented parts of ourselves. When we dream about sex, it is often not just about desire for another person, but about desire for wholeness. Jung believed that within each person, there exists an anima, the inner feminine, in men, and an animus, the inner masculine, in women. These archetypes represent the unconscious opposite within each of us, and when they are underdeveloped or repressed, they create dysfunction in our relationships and our inner world. In dreams, the anima and animus often take form in sexual or romantic imagery, revealing the parts of ourselves that we have neglected or rejected. So, what are your dreams telling you about your sexual energy? Are there recurring themes, fantasies, or symbols that seem to emerge? Jung believed that when we can understand the symbolism in our dreams, we begin to unlock the messages from our unconscious. Sexual imagery in dreams can often point to unresolved emotional or psychological issues, particularly those tied to sexuality and intimacy. For example, dreaming of sexual encounters might represent the unconscious longing for connection or wholeness. Dreaming about forbidden or taboo sexual acts may symbolize hidden desires, or perhaps fears related to vulnerability or intimacy. In some cases, dreams about sexual union represent the integration of masculine and feminine aspects within the self. Jung saw this symbolic union of opposites as central to the individuation process, becoming whole and fully integrated as a person. Jung also believed that dreams could serve as a guide for personal growth. They provide us with a mirror, reflecting the parts of ourselves that we need to confront in order to heal. If there are areas of our sexuality or emotional life that we are avoiding, these parts may manifest in our dreams in highly symbolic ways. By paying attention to these symbols and understanding their deeper meanings, we can begin to integrate the shadow, the repressed or hidden aspects of ourselves and restore balance to our psyche. Dream analysis, then, is not just a way to understand our repressed sexual energy, it is a tool for healing. By looking at the symbols in our dreams, particularly those connected to sex, we can gain insight into the unconscious forces shaping our behavior, our relationships, and our emotional health. So, the next time you have a dream that features sexual imagery, ask yourself, what is my unconscious mind trying to reveal? What parts of myself am I avoiding? And what can I learn from the desires or emotions that arise in these dreams? Understanding your dreams and the sexual energy they symbolize can be the first step toward integrating these hidden parts of yourself and ultimately achieving a deeper sense of wholeness. Carl Jung's exploration of the anima and animus, the inner feminine and inner masculine, respectively, offers profound insight into how we experience love, intimacy, and connection. These archetypes represent the unconscious opposite of our conscious gender identity. Within every man lies an anima, an inner feminine aspect, and within every woman lies an animus, an inner masculine aspect. Jung believed that these archetypes are deeply tied to our sexual energy and influence the way we relate to ourselves and others. When these archetypes are undeveloped, they can create dysfunction in our relationships. For instance, if a man has an underdeveloped anima, the feminine aspect within him, he may struggle to connect emotionally or express vulnerability in relationships. He might project this repressed aspect onto women, seeking from them what he cannot access within himself. Similarly, if a woman's animus is underdeveloped, the masculine aspect within her, she may have difficulty asserting herself, expressing her own desires, or embracing her full power. But when these archetypes are properly integrated, they provide a source of balance and wholeness. The anima and animus, when harmonized, allow us to experience love and intimacy, not from a place of need or projection, but from a place of mutual understanding and authenticity. Jung believed that sexual and emotional wholeness could only be achieved by embracing both our masculine and feminine qualities, regardless of our biological sex. In the realm of relationships, this integration of the anima and animus plays out in powerful ways. If a man is in touch with his anima, for example, he can understand and appreciate the emotional depth in a relationship, bringing more empathy and connection to his interactions with women. A woman who has integrated her animus will have the confidence and strength to assert her desires and communicate her needs in relationships. However, when the anima or animus remains undeveloped, it can lead to projection, as we discussed earlier. This is where the complexities of relationships become particularly intense. We are often drawn to people who mirror aspects of our own unconscious, people who seem to embody the parts of us we have not yet embraced. This projection creates a sense of attraction, but it's based on an illusion. We are not truly connecting with the person as they are. Instead, we are connecting with the projected image of who we want them to be, or who we believe they represent. The process of individuation, Jung's path to self-actualization, involves integrating both the anima and animus. By developing a conscious relationship with these inner archetypes, we can become more whole, allowing us to experience true intimacy. This is not intimacy based on projection, but on genuine understanding and connection. In practical terms, integrating the anima and animus means embracing both the feminine and masculine energies within ourselves, irrespective of gender. It's about balancing emotional intuition and nurturing, traditionally seen as feminine, with assertiveness, action, and rational thinking, traditionally seen as masculine. This creates a whole self that is not fragmented by unconscious desires or projections. Jung's work highlights the importance of balance not just between the conscious and unconscious, but between the masculine and feminine aspects of the psyche. The more we integrate these energies, the more authentic and fulfilling our relationships become. We move beyond the projection of our shadow onto others, allowing for deeper and more meaningful connections. As you reflect on your own relationships, consider how your anima or animus might be influencing your interactions. Are you projecting parts of your unconscious onto others? Are you embracing the full spectrum of your inner energies, or are you disconnected from parts of yourself? Jung's work invites us to question these dynamics, and in doing so, open the door to more profound self-awareness and intimacy. Jung believed that the path to psychological wholeness or individuation requires us to confront and integrate our shadow, the parts of ourselves that we have rejected or repressed. This process is central to understanding how we relate to our sexual energy. The shadow contains the aspects of our psyche that we've learned to disown, especially those connected to our sexuality, desires, and instincts. When we refuse to acknowledge these parts of ourselves, they don't simply vanish. They continue to influence our behavior from the unconscious, often in ways that we don't fully understand. These repressed aspects of ourselves can create psychological fragmentation, where the conscious self, the persona we present to the world, becomes disconnected from the unconscious, primal forces that drive us. For Jung, the shadow was not something inherently negative. It was simply the unknown and unconscious parts of our personality, those traits, impulses, and desires that we have denied or failed to integrate. While the shadow can hold dark or destructive tendencies, it also contains untapped creative potential and a source of personal power. In the case of sexual energy, the repressed sexual shadow can take on many forms. It might manifest as sexual shame, fear, or guilt feelings that often arise when we deny our sexual desires or instincts. These feelings can distort our self-image and our ability to connect with others authentically. but they can also fuel unconscious behaviors, such as compulsive sexual behaviors, emotional manipulation, or destructive relationships. Integration of the shadow requires conscious recognition and acceptance of these repressed aspects of ourselves. Jung emphasized that personal growth begins when we bring these hidden parts into the light, embracing them as part of our whole self. When we acknowledge our sexual energy as a natural, vital force rather than something to be feared or suppressed, we begin the process of reclaiming the power that has been hidden in the shadows. This integration process doesn't happen overnight. It requires deep self-reflection and the willingness to confront the parts of ourselves that we've been taught to reject. For example, many people experience sexual shame due to societal conditioning, religious teachings, or past trauma. This shame keeps them disconnected from their sexual energy and prevents them from fully embracing their desires. But when we integrate this energy, we stop hiding from it and instead learn to use it as a source of empowerment. The key to integration is awareness. By becoming aware of the parts of ourselves that we've suppressed, we can begin to transform the negative energy that comes with repression into a source of creativity, vitality, and emotional richness. We can also heal the wounds caused by shame and guilt, moving towards a more authentic expression of our sexuality. It is important to note that integration doesn't mean acting on every sexual impulse or desire. Instead, it means accepting and understanding our sexual energy as a vital part of who we are. By bringing it into our conscious awareness, we can learn to channel it in healthy and constructive ways, whether through creative endeavors, intimate relationships, or personal growth. When we integrate our sexual energy, we reclaim our fullness. We stop living in fear of our desires and begin to experience true freedom. This freedom comes from knowing that we are not fragmented or broken but whole, embracing all aspects of ourselves, including the parts that were once hidden in the shadows. The integration of the shadow is a crucial step in Jung's process of individuation, the journey toward self-actualization. It's not an easy path, and it's not a quick fix. But by confronting our sexual energy, all the fears and desires tied to it, we open ourselves to greater personal power, creativity, and emotional connection. Sexuality is often treated as one of the most complex and charged aspects of human experience. It's a subject that carries with it an inherent duality. In one hand, it's a powerful force of desire, vitality, and connection. On the other, it is also laden with shame, guilt, and social taboos. This duality between sexual desire and sexual shame is one of the key themes in Jungian psychology. From the earliest stages of life, most of us are conditioned to view our sexual desires through the lens of societal norms and values. These norms often shape the way we understand and express our sexuality, leaving us with internal conflicts between our innate desires and the moral or cultural expectations imposed on us. Jung believed that the repression of desire, particularly sexual desire, creates an internal conflict, leading to psychological fragmentation. The more we try to suppress these natural impulses, the more power they gain in our unconscious mind, where they shape our thoughts, behaviors, and emotions in subtle, often destructive ways. This repression, however, doesn't just affect us individually. It's deeply connected to cultural and societal attitudes toward sexuality. Many societies have historically viewed sexuality as something to be controlled or hidden, and in some cases, as something inherently sinful or shameful. This cultural shame is passed down through generations, creating a cycle of internalized guilt about sexual expression and desire. Jung's insight here is powerful. Sexual repression does not purify the soul, it fragments it. When we repress parts of ourselves, especially our sexual energy, we create a psychological divide between our conscious and unconscious minds. We lose access to a critical source of personal vitality and creativity. But more importantly, we lose access to our authentic selves. We become disconnected from the raw energy that fuels our passions, our desires, and our life force. The sexual shadow, as Jung described it, is the part of ourselves that holds the repressed desires, fantasies, and emotions that we have learned to deny. These hidden aspects of our sexuality do not disappear. They take on new, often distorted forms. They can manifest as obsessive behaviors, compulsive desires, or emotional turmoil. When we suppress our desires, we do not eliminate them. We distort them, creating an inner conflict that can lead to anxiety, depression, and other psychological struggles. But here's where Jung's message becomes particularly profound. Integration is the solution. By embracing our sexual energy, not just as a source of physical pleasure, but as a vital, creative force, we can begin to heal the split between our conscious and unconscious selves. This doesn't mean acting on every desire, but rather accepting those desires as part of our wholeness. When we integrate our sexual energy, we free ourselves from the shame and guilt that bind us, allowing us to channel this energy into creative, productive, and life-affirming pursuits. Jung believed that true personal growth could only occur when we stop seeing sexuality as something to be ashamed of or feared, and instead recognize it as a powerful force for self-expression, vitality, and creativity. When we stop hiding from our sexual energy, we no longer feel controlled by it. Instead, we own it, integrating it into our conscious lives in a healthy and productive way. This process of integrating sexual energy is not just about understanding or accepting desire, it's about releasing the grip of shame and guilt that so often accompany it. When we do this, we reclaim a vital force that is crucial not only to our emotional and psychological well-being, but also to our ability to live fully and authentically. So, the question we must ask ourselves is this: how much of your inner conflict, your emotional turmoil, or your relationship struggles are tied to the shame and guilt you've internalized about your sexual energy? How much of your desire to control, hide, or suppress this part of yourself is actually preventing you from embracing your true vitality and power? Jung's work teaches us that sexuality, when fully embraced and integrated, is not something to be feared, but rather celebrated as one of the most powerful sources of personal transformation. It is only through accepting the fullness of our sexual nature that we can begin to experience true emotional liberation, creative freedom, and authentic connection. While much of the focus on sexuality often revolves around the physical act itself, Jung's work expands the understanding of sexual energy to include sensuality, intimacy, and emotional connection. Sensuality is the capacity to fully engage with the world through the senses, to experience life deeply, not just through the mind, but through the body. This is the root of intimacy, a concept that goes beyond sexual intercourse to encompass a deeper, more profound connection with oneself and others. Jung believed that the repression of sexual energy leads not only to the suppression of desire, but also to a lack of presence in our lives. When we disconnect from our sexual energy, we lose touch with essential aspects of our being, our ability to engage fully with the physical and emotional experiences of life. We become detached, numb, or overly intellectualized, avoiding the raw physical and emotional experiences that connect us to the world and to others. True intimacy, the kind of emotional, psychological, and spiritual closeness that fosters deep connection, can only be achieved when we are fully present in the moment. And being present means embracing our sensual nature, experiencing life with all of our senses, and being willing to open ourselves up to vulnerability and connection. Sensuality is not just about the enjoyment of pleasure, it's about attunement to the world around us and a deep awareness of our own bodies and desires. In our modern world, intimacy has become increasingly commodified and simplified. We often equate intimacy with sex, seeing it as a physical exchange rather than a deeper, more meaningful connection. But true intimacy, according to Jung, requires more than just physical closeness. It requires emotional vulnerability, trust, and the willingness to fully experience another person's inner world. It requires being attuned not only to their physical presence, but to the emotional and psychological energy they bring. The connection between sensuality and intimacy is deeply rooted in the integration of sexual energy. When we accept and embrace our sexual energy as part of our wholeness, we begin to experience a fuller connection to ourselves and others. We are no longer disconnected or inhibited by shame or fear. Instead, we can approach intimacy with a sense of openness, curiosity, and receptivity. However, when we suppress our sexual energy, we not only stunt our capacity for pleasure, but also our ability to truly connect with others. We might find ourselves engaging in relationships that are shallow or based on surface-level attraction. We might crave closeness but find ourselves unable to experience the emotional and physical intimacy that comes from being fully present with someone else. Jung's insight into sensuality and intimacy reminds us that the most profound form of intimacy isn't just about sexual release. It's about the union of bodies, minds, and spirits. The integration of our sexual energy allows us to create deeper connections, not only with others, but with ourselves. It is through embracing our sensuality, our ability to feel, to touch, to connect that we can experience true intimacy, the kind that fosters trust, vulnerability, and ultimately, love. By embracing sensuality in its fullest sense, we tap into a profound source of power and creativity that enhances every aspect of our lives, from our relationships to our personal growth. Sensuality is not just about indulgence, it is about awareness, presence, and connection to ourselves, to others, and to the world around us. Jung's work shows that true healing and personal transformation begin when we embrace the parts of ourselves we've hidden, the parts of our psyche, our sexuality, and our desires that we've suppressed. The process of integrating these repressed aspects is not just about understanding or accepting them intellectually. It's about experiencing them on a deep, emotional level and making them a conscious part of our lives. Integration is the key to unlocking our true potential. By consciously bringing our sexual energy along with all the suppressed desires, fantasies, and emotions we've been taught to hide into our awareness, we begin to reclaim the vitality and power that lies dormant within us. This isn't just about sexual freedom, it's about reclaiming the creative energy that fuels every aspect of our lives. When we integrate our sexual energy, we can harness it to fuel personal growth, self-expression, and authentic connection. Healing through integration is about more than just addressing sexual repression. It's about addressing all aspects of the shadow, the parts of ourselves we have rejected or ignored. When we suppress certain desires or traits, we lose touch with our true selves. But when we face those suppressed aspects, we begin to heal the fragmentation within our psyche. This healing is a journey of self-acceptance, where we stop judging ourselves for the parts we've been taught to hide, and instead learn to honor all of our desires, even those that once seemed shameful or taboo. The integration of sexual energy is also a path to emotional maturity. Many people seek spiritual growth, creative inspiration, or emotional healing without realizing they are cut off from the very source that fuels these pursuits. The libido, the creative energy that we often think of as separate from our sexual desires, is, in fact, deeply intertwined with it. When we suppress our sexual energy, we also suppress our creative potential, our emotional depth, and our ability to fully experience life. But when we allow ourselves to embrace and express our sexual energy, we begin to experience life more fully. This doesn't mean acting on every impulse, but rather acknowledging and channeling that energy into productive and positive aspects of our lives, whether through art, work, relationships, or spirituality. The energy we once suppressed can now fuel our growth and transformation. This process of integration also impacts our relationships. When we embrace our sexual energy and accept it as a natural part of our being, we approach relationships with a sense of wholeness. We are no longer projecting our repressed desires or fears onto others, but instead, we are able to engage in authentic, emotionally fulfilling connections. The more we integrate our own sexual energy, the more we are able to connect with others in ways that are deep, genuine, and truly intimate. True spirituality is also tied to the process of integrating sexual energy. In many ancient traditions, such as Tantra, sexual energy was seen not as something to be suppressed, but as a powerful spiritual force. Tantra viewed sexual energy as a pathway to higher consciousness, a way to merge body, mind, and soul. Jung, too, recognized that sexual energy could be used for spiritual growth, not as an escape or indulgence, but as a means of transcendence. When we integrate our sexual energy, we open the door to deeper spiritual awareness, a more authentic connection to our inner self, and a clearer sense of our life purpose. We no longer live in fear of our desires or shame about our sexuality. Instead, we accept all parts of ourselves, using them as sources of power, creativity, and spirituality. Ultimately, integration is not just about accepting our sexual energy, it's about reclaiming our wholeness. The parts of ourselves that we once rejected or denied are not separate from us. They are part of our true nature, and when we embrace them, we become fully alive, fully integrated, and fully powerful. When we reclaim our sexual energy, we are not just taking back a part of ourselves, we are reclaiming personal power. Sexual energy, when embraced and integrated, becomes a force that can fuel every aspect of our lives, from our creative endeavors to our relationships and our personal growth. Jung recognized that this energy is life force. It's the driving force behind creation, vitality, and even spiritual awakening. For too long, many people have been taught to fear or deny this energy. Society has conditioned us to view sexuality as something to be hidden, controlled, or used only in certain ways. As a result, many individuals live fragmented lives, disconnected from the energy that could fuel their creativity, passion, and purpose. Sexual repression, Jung argued, doesn't just suppress desire, it cuts us off from vitality. But the power of sexual energy is not simply in the physical act of sex itself. Its true power lies in its ability to fuel creativity, self-expression, and transformation. This is the libido in its highest form, the raw creative energy that drives not only sexual attraction, but also art, innovation, and the pursuit of purpose. When we integrate this energy, we no longer feel controlled by it. Instead, we can channel it into productive, life-affirming pursuits that help us become our truest selves. The journey of reclaiming sexual power involves shedding the shame and guilt that often surround our desires. It means accepting our sexual energy as a natural, essential part of who we are, one that is neither good nor bad, but simply human. This is a transformative process, one that requires us to move beyond societal conditioning and reconnect with the most primal aspects of our being. When we reclaim our sexual power, we begin to experience a profound sense of liberation. We stop seeking external validation through sexual performance or conformity to social norms. Instead, we learn to own our desires, channel them with awareness, and express them in ways that align with our true selves. This is the essence of sexual sovereignty, the ability to be in charge of our own sexual energy, to use it for empowerment, and to make conscious choices that reflect our inner truth. The act of reclaiming sexual power also leads to a greater sense of self-worth. When we accept our sexual energy, we stop seeking approval or validation from others. We no longer feel the need to conform to other people's expectations of what our desires should be. Instead, we come into alignment with our own inner truth, and this alignment radiates outwards, creating deeper, more authentic connections with others. This transformation is not just personal, it is revolutionary. When we reclaim our sexual power, we not only change our own lives, but we also challenge the societal structures that seek to repress and commodify sexuality. We stop being controlled by the external forces that tell us what is acceptable and start reclaiming the energy that has always been ours. In doing so, we open the door to collective liberation, where sexual energy is no longer used as a tool of manipulation or control, but as a force for healing, creativity, and authentic connection. Jung understood that the process of reclaiming sexual power was integral to the journey of individuation, the path toward becoming a fully integrated, authentic self. Sexual energy, in its purest form, is not a source of shame, guilt, or conflict. It is a force for creativity, self-expression, and empowerment. By reclaiming it, we unlock the fullest potential of who we are and experience a deep sense of wholeness. Reclaiming sexual power is not about indulging in every desire or abandoning responsibility. It is about awareness. It is about becoming conscious of our sexual energy, integrating it into our lives, and using it to fuel personal growth, creative expression, and meaningful relationships. When we embrace this energy, we become empowered in every area of our lives. The path to wholeness is the culmination of Jung's concept of individuation, the journey toward becoming the fullest version of ourselves. This path requires the integration of all aspects of our psyche, the conscious and unconscious, the light and the dark, the accepted and the repressed. When we integrate our sexual energy into our lives, we are no longer divided. We become whole, unified, and capable of living authentically. This process of becoming whole is not about perfection, it's about acceptance. It's about embracing every part of ourselves, including the parts we've hidden away in shame or fear. It's about recognizing that every aspect of our being, our desires, our flaws, our vulnerability is an essential part of the human experience. For Jung, wholeness is achieved not by rejecting the shadow or repressing our sexual energy, but by embracing it. When we repress our sexual energy, we are cutting ourselves off from a source of personal power and creativity. But when we accept and integrate that energy, we begin to experience a sense of balance, vitality, and inner peace. We no longer feel fragmented or torn between who we are and who we think we should be. Instead, we live in alignment with our true selves, free from the constraints of societal norms or external expectations. This journey toward wholeness is transformative. It allows us to connect more deeply with ourselves and others. As we integrate our sexual energy, we also cultivate a greater sense of self-awareness and self-love. We no longer feel the need to perform or present a false version of ourselves to the world. Instead, we show up as we truly are, vulnerable, authentic, and whole. Jung believed that the key to true transformation lies in self-acceptance. When we stop rejecting the parts of ourselves that we've been conditioned to fear or shame, we unlock the potential for growth, creativity, and fulfillment. This acceptance of all aspects of ourselves, our desires, our imperfections, our sexuality, is the path to personal empowerment and spiritual growth. In practical terms, embracing wholeness means no longer being controlled by repressed sexual desires or fears. It means accepting our sexuality as a natural and vital part of our being, and using it as a source of creative expression, emotional depth, and personal strength. As we integrate this energy into our lives, we free ourselves from the internal conflict that comes from shame and denial. The process of individuation is not easy. It requires courage to confront the parts of ourselves that we've hidden or rejected. But it is through this process of confrontation and integration that we become truly whole. As we embrace our sexual energy, we begin to experience a sense of unity and balance within ourselves. We stop living in opposition to our desires, and instead, we learn to work with them, using them to fuel our creativity, our relationships, and our purpose in life. True wholeness is not about achieving perfection or being free from internal conflict. It is about embracing all parts of ourselves and integrating them into a unified sense of self. It is about finding peace within ourselves and living in alignment with our inner truth. When we embrace our sexual energy and integrate it into our lives, we reclaim a vital source of personal power. This power is not about domination or control. It is the power of authenticity, creativity, and self-expression. It is the power to live fully, to love deeply, and to create meaning in every aspect of our lives. The path to wholeness is a lifelong journey, but it begins with the willingness to embrace every part of ourselves, including our sexual energy. By doing so, we unlock the potential for deep transformation, personal fulfillment, and authentic connection with others. Jung saw sexual energy as far more than just the fuel for reproduction or physical pleasure. It is a powerful creative force that transcends its biological function. The libido, in Jungian terms, is a life force, a vital energy that powers not only our desires and sexual impulses, but also our creativity, our emotions, and our capacity for transformation. When we understand and integrate this energy, it becomes a source of creation, shaping every aspect of our lives, from our work and relationships to our spiritual growth. At its core, sexual energy is the energy of life itself. It is what drives us to create, to build, to express ourselves in the world. This energy fuels every artistic endeavor, every innovation, every moment of inspiration. Whether we are writing, painting, building a business, or developing a relationship, it is this deep, primal energy that fuels our passion and purpose. Jung believed that sexual energy, when properly integrated and channeled, is the source of our most creative and authentic expressions. The act of creation, whether through art, music, or innovation, can be viewed as the transformation of sexual energy into something that reflects our deepest desires, thoughts, and emotions. This creative energy is not something separate from our sexuality. It is the same energy that fuels both our intimate desires and our capacity to bring new ideas, experiences, and creations into the world. But when we repress this energy, we disconnect from the creative force that drives us. We may feel stuck, uninspired, or unable to fully engage with life in a meaningful way. Creativity, in Jung's view, is not just a mental exercise or a product of intellect. It is deeply connected to our emotional and sexual vitality. When we suppress our sexual energy, we block the flow of creativity in our lives, leaving us feeling empty or unfulfilled. When we accept our sexual energy and integrate it into our lives, we open ourselves up to creative potential that can transform every aspect of our existence. This energy becomes a force for growth and expression, allowing us to pursue our passions and engage with life in a fuller, more vibrant way. Rather than being controlled by unconscious desires or fears, we begin to channel this energy consciously, using it to shape our work, our relationships, and our personal growth. Sexual energy, in this sense, is not about indulgence. It is about expression. It is about the freedom to create, to transform our internal energy into something external that reflects our deepest truths. This creative energy is the key to living authentically and fully. For example, Many artists, writers, and musicians speak about the importance of feeling alive in order to create their best work. That vitality often comes from a sense of sexual aliveness, the energy that is not just about sexual pleasure, but the raw, unfiltered vitality that comes from being connected to one's true desires and passions. Jung also tied this creative process to the idea of psychological alchemy. Just as in alchemy, the goal is to transform base materials into gold. In the realm of the psyche, the goal is to take repressed unconscious energy, such as sexual energy, and transform it into something of higher value, creativity, expression, and wholeness. So, when we reclaim and integrate our sexual energy, we are not only healing our psyche and our relationships, we are unlocking a fountain of creativity that can drive us to new heights in our personal and professional lives. The energy that once lay dormant, buried in the unconscious, becomes a powerful force for personal expression, innovation, and authentic creation. This is the essence of true empowerment, to use our sexual energy not just for physical pleasure, but as a driving force for creativity, purpose, and self-realization. We become the creators of our own lives, channeling this primal energy to build the world we want to live in, whether that's through our work, our relationships, or the impact we have on others. When we stop repressing and start integrating our sexual energy, we open the door to a life filled with creative vitality, emotional depth, and a sense of purpose that fuels us every day. The true power of sexual energy lies not in its suppression but in its liberation. For too long, many people have been taught to fear or hide this natural part of themselves. Sexuality has been viewed through the lens of shame, guilt, and social restriction, often confined to narrow, repressive definitions of what is acceptable. But when we begin to liberate our sexual energy, we reclaim a source of power that has the potential to transform not just our personal lives, but society itself. Jung believed that the repression of sexuality is one of the greatest sources of internal conflict. When we repress sexual desires, we are denying a fundamental part of ourselves, cutting off a vital source of energy that could be used for growth, creativity, and connection. But the repression doesn't end in the unconscious mind, it manifests in our daily lives. It shows up in our relationships, our emotional struggles, and even in our creative blocks. The longer we suppress this energy, the more powerful and chaotic it becomes. To liberate this energy is to free ourselves from the shackles of shame, guilt, and societal expectations. It is about embracing the full range of our sexual nature, acknowledging it as a source of vitality, creativity, and personal power. By accepting and integrating this energy, we no longer feel controlled by it. Instead, we become its masters, directing it consciously in ways that serve our growth, relationships, and life goals. The liberation of sexual energy is not about indulgence or recklessness. It is about awareness and control. It is about understanding that our sexual energy is a powerful life force, not something to be feared, but something to be respected and harnessed. When we liberate our sexual energy, we stop seeing it as a problem to be fixed or hidden. Instead, we see it as a creative force, something that can fuel our passions, our desires, and our connection to others. Jung's concept of individuation suggests that true personal growth comes from integrating the unconscious with the conscious self, bringing hidden parts of ourselves into awareness. In this process, our sexual energy is not something to be denied or repressed. It is something to be acknowledged and used as a force for empowerment and transformation. In modern culture, we are caught in a paradox. On one hand, sexuality is overexposed, commodified, and exploited through advertising, media, and entertainment. On the other, true intimacy, emotional connection, and healthy conversations about sexuality are often rare. The solution, according to Jung, is not to swing between extremes, but to find balance, to recognize sexual energy for what it truly is, a sacred, life-affirming force that fuels creativity, intimacy, and connection. Liberating sexual energy also means freeing ourselves from the victimhood of sexual shame. It means understanding that our sexual desires are not wrong or dangerous, but part of the human experience. As we liberate this energy, we also liberate ourselves from societal judgment and the internalized shame that keeps us from fully embracing our true selves. In practical terms, liberation means embracing our sexual energy without guilt or shame, using it to empower our creativity, deepen our relationships, and express our true selves. It means taking conscious control of this energy, using it to fuel our work, our art, and our personal growth, instead of allowing it to control us from the unconscious. By liberating sexual energy, we open up a fountain of power, a source of vitality that flows through every aspect of our lives. We stop being defined by our fears and repressions and instead become defined by our authenticity, creativity, and personal empowerment. When we reclaim this energy, we not only transform our own lives, but also begin to transform the world around us. We stop living under the weight of societal expectations and shame, and we start creating a new world, one where sexual energy is seen as a powerful, healing, and life-giving force. This liberation is a deeply spiritual act. It is not about indulgence or escapism. It is about reconnecting with the core of who we are. Embracing our sexuality as a sacred, powerful force that shapes every part of our lives. By doing so, we unlock the full potential of our being emotionally, creatively, spiritually, and we step into a life of authenticity, freedom, and empowerment. As we reach the final part of our journey through the profound teachings of Carl Jung, we arrive at the most important realization of all. The reclamation of sexual energy is not just a personal endeavor, it is a path to wholeness. When we integrate our sexual energy, when we embrace the fullness of our desires, vulnerabilities, and power, we unlock the potential to live as our most authentic selves. For Jung, the ultimate goal of the individuation process was to become whole, unify the disparate parts of our psyche, integrating the shadow, the repressed aspects of ourselves, and our most primal desires, including sexuality. Wholeness doesn't mean perfection. It means accepting every part of who we are, our light and our darkness, our desires and our fears, and understanding that all of these elements are integral to our experience as human beings. The liberation of sexual energy is the final piece in the puzzle of self-actualization. It is about accepting and reclaiming the vitality that has always been inside us, allowing it to fuel our creativity, our relationships, and our very existence. Wholeness comes when we stop running from our desires and start listening to them, honoring them, and integrating them into our lives in a healthy, conscious way. When we liberate and integrate our sexual energy, we not only heal the divisions within ourselves, but also begin to heal the collective wounds of society. We begin to challenge the norms that have been ingrained in us, norms that have separated us from our true, creative selves. We stop living according to the limited, often damaging expectations placed upon us by culture and society, and instead, we create a new path that reflects the true essence of who we are. This path to wholeness requires courage. It requires the willingness to confront the parts of ourselves that we have rejected, the parts that we have been taught to fear. But as we embrace our sexual energy, we step into a new realm of power, one that is based on authenticity, creativity, and emotional freedom. This reclamation of our sexual power is not just a personal journey, it is a revolutionary one. It challenges the social and cultural systems that seek to repress and control our energy, and in doing so, it opens up a new space for healing, creativity, and connection. By embracing our sexual energy, we free ourselves not just from societal constraints, but from the internalized shame and guilt that have prevented us from living fully. True liberation comes when we understand that our sexual energy is not a force to be feared, but a source of creation, a life force that can transform our lives. The energy that once lay dormant in the shadows, shaping our thoughts, desires, and behaviors unconsciously, becomes a conscious force for growth and empowerment. It becomes a driving force that propels us forward into authenticity, connection, and true self-expression. In embracing our sexual energy, we embrace our wholeness. We stop fragmenting ourselves into parts, some acceptable, some not, and we begin to live as a unified, integrated self. We experience true intimacy, not just with others but with ourselves. Our relationships become deeper, more fulfilling, because we are no longer projecting our shadow onto others. We begin to connect from a place of authenticity, vulnerability, and creative energy. As we reclaim our sexual power, we also reclaim our creative potential, our emotional depth, and our life force. We stop living in conflict with our desires, and instead, we channel them consciously into every aspect of our lives. This is the path to wholeness, to live as our true selves, fully aware of our sexual energy and empowered by it. Jung's teachings remind us that integration and reclamation of sexual energy are not just personal pursuits, they are the keys to creating a more authentic, creative, and whole society. And so, As you reflect on this journey, ask yourself, what would your life look like if you stopped running from your own desires? What might change if you embraced every part of yourself, especially the parts that once scared you? The truth is not waiting for you at the end of the journey. It's inside you right now, ready to be embraced. By reclaiming your sexual energy, you are not just changing your life, you are stepping into a new way of being, a way that is empowered, creative, and whole.